The red alarm lights filled the command center on Kepler Station, painting everything in a color of blood and fear. Commander David Harper stood rigid at the main display console, watching the threat indicators multiply across the screen like a plague of locusts. The first attack came at dawn local time, when most colonists were sleeping in their homes, unaware that their peaceful world was about to change forever. The Krell ships appear from the darkness between stars, their weapons firing before anyone could even send a warning. The communication towers on Colony Prime crumbled under the intense energy blasts, cutting off all contact with the outlying settlements. Governor Kevin Brooks was in his office when the tremor started, the ground shaking beneath his feet as explosions bloomed across the landscape outside his window. He gripped the edge of his desk, watching the sky turn orange and black with smoke, and Fire Commander Harper received the first distress call on the secure military channel, a voice breaking with panic telling him that Colony Prime was under attack. His hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, activating every defense system that still functioned. The colony had limited weapons, nothing that could match the firepower of the Krell warships that filled the sky above them. Harper knew this as soon as he saw the weapon signatures. The Krell were a military species, evolved for warfare, and they had brought real weapons to this fight. Dr. Elena Martinez was coordinating evacuations from the hospital when the power went out. Her team moved quickly through the darkened corridors, guiding patients toward the underground shelters that had been built during the early days of the colony. She knew that the backup generators would keep running for a few hours, but after that, the thought was too terrible to finish. Elena kept her voice steady and calm as she directed her people, though inside her chest, her heart was pounding like a wild animal fighting to escape. The attack lasted 3 hours. The Krell forces systematically destroyed the communication infrastructure, the power plants, and the government buildings, as if they had studied human colonies carefully and knew exactly which targets to strike when it was over. Nearly 5,000 colonists lay dead, and thousands more missing. The Krell occupied the landing field and several key positions throughout the colony, but they did not advance further into the populated areas. Not yet. Governor Brooks made his way through the underground tunnels to the military command center, where Harper was still coordinating the scattered remains of colonial defense forces. The two men looked at each other across the command table, and Brooks saw the truth in Harper's eyes. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and cut off from the rest of human civilization. The Galactic Council received reports of the attack within hours. Their response was disappointing. A message came through the old communication relay that had been buried in a hidden bunker, powered by ancient solar cells. The Council acknowledged the attack but suggested that colonial disputes could often be resolved through negotiation. They had no military forces to spare at the moment. They said the more pressing conflicts in the Outer Rim demanded immediate attention. They offered sympathy and recommendations for peaceful resolution. Harper nearly threw the communication console across the room when he read those words. His hands shook with fury and something else, a cold determination that settled deep in his bones. Humanity was on its own. This was not going to be solved through negotiation. The Krell would see that as weakness, and they would crush everyone on these colonies like insects beneath their feet. Elena emerged from the shelter sections an hour later, her clothes covered in dust and blood that was not her own. She went directly to Harper in the command center. He was staring at a map of the colony, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. Elena could see the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. She placed a hand on his arm. We have secured 17,000 civilians in the underground sections, she said. Her voice was steady, and her presence seemed to ground him in the moment. Harper nodded slowly, then looked at her with eyes that had already seen too much. The Krell will attempt to force us out, he told her. They will need to capture the colony intact if they want to use it as a base of operations. That gives us time. But not much Elena understood what he meant. They would fight, and they would die. But they would not surrender. Governor Brooks called an emergency assembly of the remaining government officials and military personnel. The group gathered in one of the largest underground chambers. Fear and determination mixing in their faces, Brooks spoke with the authority of his position. But his voice carried the weight of impossible choices. We do not have the resources to repel the Krull forces. He announced the reality was harsh, but it was the truth. We cannot rely on the Galactic Council for immediate assistance. Our only hope is to survive long enough for help to arrive from Earth. This statement brought silence. Then quiet murmurs of desperation and hope. Help from Earth seemed like a distant dream. A possibility too far away to matter, but it was something. A thread of hope in the darkness that consumed them all. Harper then walked forward, and the room turned to listen. He outlined a strategy of survival. They would maintain their presence in the colonies, keeping the Krull forces occupied and unable to expand their control. They would use the underground systems to move supplies and people, staying hidden in the vast tunnel networks that connected the different settlement areas. They would conduct small strikes against Krull positions, harassing them, making them bleed. The Krull have underestimated us, Harper said, his voice carrying a certainty that seemed to come from somewhere beyond himself. They think we are a simple people with simple weapons. They think we will surrender when our cities burn, but we will show them what it means to attack the children of Earth. Elena looked at Harper during this speech, and she saw something change in his expression. It was as if a door had opened inside him, revealing a strength and purpose that had been waiting for this moment. She wondered what other secrets humanity carried in the shadows of its history. What other capabilities had been hidden away, waiting for a time like this in the hours that followed. The scattered remains of the colonial military force began to organize. The colonists in the shelters were given assignments, roles to play in the survival of their communities. Medical stations were established. Weapons were distributed to those who could fight, and plans began to form for what would come next. David Harper stood alone in the command center as the night fell on the colony. Looking at the maps and displays, one message kept repeating in his mind. The words of an old military doctrine that had been taught to him in his training. Remember that your enemy is likely to make the same mistakes in victory that you made in defeat. The doctrine stated, the Krull have already made their first mistake. They have shown us what we need to defend against. And they have shown us that they are not invincible. He activated a hidden communication channel, one that predated even the official colonial networks. A system that was supposed to only exist in theoretical studies. He began to encrypt the message and send it toward Earth. His fingers moved across the keyboard with precise intent. And in that moment, he knew that everything was about to change, not just for the colonies, but for all of human civilization. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a facility hidden beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Victoria Stone received the encrypted message from the Kepler colonies. She read it once, twice, then a third time. Her hand trembled slightly as she processed the meaning. The hammer was falling, and humanity had to respond. The facility she commanded was known as the Dragon Keep. Though almost no one in the Galactic Council even knew of its existence for more than 200 years, humanity had secretly built its military might, hiding behind the facade of a peaceful trading civilization. The Pitterster, the Bersteböste, hiding behind the facade of a peaceful trading civilization, the Pei. Warships were constructed in orbital shipyards that floated in the shadow of the moon. Away from the prying sensors of alien observers, the soldiers were trained in classified military academies on remote islands and hidden valleys. Admiral Stone moved through the command center, and her presence seemed to energize everyone around her. She was tall and gray-haired, with the bearing of someone who had been born for command. Her voice carried authority that did not need to raise itself to be heard. Sound the activation signal. She commanded. The words hung in the air for a moment before operations personnel began moving, their hands flying across keyboards and communication panels. The message went out through quantum encrypted channels to every military installation on Earth and in Earth orbit within minutes. The alarm systems at the lunar training base began to wail, their sound cut through the silence of the military headquarters, alerting 10,000 soldiers that their time had come. President Robert Hayes sat in the Situation Room at the White House, watching multiple screens display the crisis unfolding light years away. Beside him were his closest advisors, the people who had sworn oaths to protect humanity and uphold the secrets that had been kept for so long. The president closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with resolve. He had always known this day might come, though he had hoped it would not. Humanity had trained and prepared for this possibility, but the cost would be terrible. The young men and women in the Dragon Legion would be going to war, and not all of them would return home. Captain Marcus Chun was in the pilot training facility when the alarm sounded. He had been practicing maneuvers in a simulation chamber, pushing his reflexes to their limits, preparing for exactly this moment. He climbed out of the simulator pod and made his way to the briefing room with dozens of other pilots. The air was thick with anticipation and something else, something deeper, a sense of purpose that came from knowing you were about to do something that mattered. In the briefing room, they were told the truth for the first time. The human worlds were under attack. The colonies in the Kepler system faced destruction unless help arrived within days. The Dragon Legion would be deployed to repel the invasion and protect human lives. The Krell Dominion had made a critical error, and now they would learn what it meant to stand against the human species. The Dragon Legion warships emerged from their orbital dockyards like great metal serpents awakening from a long sleep. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering and imagination, equipped with weapon systems that even the oldest civilizations in the galaxy had never seen. The ships had names that spoke to human history and culture. The flagship was called the Liberty, and she was a beauty to behold. A warship that moved with the grace of a dancer and the strength of a warrior across Earth's surface. Manufacturing plants switched into emergency production mode. Factories that had been producing consumer goods and scientific equipment suddenly transformed into weapons production centers. The workers moved with purpose, knowing that every device they created might save the life of someone on a distant colony. The sense of unity was extraordinary, as if the entire human species had suddenly remembered that they were one people, bound together by something deeper than politics or commerce. Captain Marcus Chun received his assignment and studied the briefing materials with intense focus. His ship was the Valiant, a destroyer-class vessel with a crew of 250 people. He would be the pilot, the person responsible for maneuvering this deadly machine through the corridors of space. His hands were steady, his mind sharp, but he felt the weight of the responsibility like a physical force. The lieutenant of ground forces, a woman named Sarah Johnson, began organizing the assault teams that would liberate the colonies. She had trained for this her entire military career, working through countless simulations and combat scenarios. Now the simulation would become reality. The assault teams would be the first humans the Krell forces would see up close, and Sarah intended to show them exactly what human determination looked like. Admiral Victoria Stone addressed the combined military forces from the main broadcast station. Her image appeared on screens throughout Earth, on the moon, in every military installation, and on the ships preparing for war. We fight for our families, she said, her voice steady and clear. We fight for the children sleeping safely in colonies light years away, not knowing that their protectors are standing ready. We fight because we are human, because we will not allow innocence to be destroyed in the darkness of space. The Krell have awakened something they did not understand when they attacked our people. They have awakened the Dragon Legion. And now they will face the full might of human civilization. The B. Words resonated through the command centers and ready rooms where soldiers prepared themselves mentally and physically for combat. They were about to embark on a journey to the edge of known space, where they would face an enemy they had never encountered before. But they carried with them the knowledge that humanity had prepared for this, had built the weapons and trained the warriors necessary to face any threat to their survival. President Robert Hayes addressed the human worlds through television and digital networks. He spoke of sacrifice and unity, of the values that humans fought to protect. He talked about the children in the colonies who deserved to grow up safe and free from oppression. He pledged that Earth would send every resource necessary to ensure human victory. The resources began moving immediately. Supply ships loaded with ammunition, food, medical equipment, and replacement parts for damaged equipment began their long journey toward the Kepler system. Tens of thousands of soldiers boarded transport vessels, leaving their families and homes behind to travel to war. The sight of the Dragon Legion fleet preparing for launch was something that would be remembered for generations to come. Marcus Chum performed the final pre-launch checks on his ship, running through the protocols that had been drilled into him throughout his training. The Valiant hummed with power beneath his hands, her engines ready to propel her across the vast distances of space. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role and executing it with precision in a quiet moment before launch. Marcus looked out at the stars and thought about the colonists who were waiting for him to arrive. He thought about the children who would play in new gardens if he and his companions succeeded. He thought about the weight of human hopes and dreams that now rested on his shoulders, and those of every soldier and sailor in the Dragon Legion. Admiral Victoria Stone made a final call to the president to confirm that the fleet was ready to launch. The authorization came back immediately. The Dragon Legion was cleared for departure. The greatest military force humanity had ever assembled began to move, using its advanced propulsion systems to build up tremendous speed as it oriented toward the distant star system where humanity's fate would be decided. The Krell Dominion intercepted early warning signals about massive human military activity, but the information was incomplete and confusing. They expected a human response, certainly, but nothing like the magnitude of forces being deployed. The command structure of the Krell Dominion convened an emergency council to discuss this unexpected development. Some commanders expressed doubt about the wisdom of continuing the assault. Others argued for full commitment to the campaign, certain that their superior experience would overcome any technological advantage that humans might have possessed. What the Krell did not understand was that humanity had invested generations in preparation. They had watched and learned from every older civilization in the galaxy. They had developed technologies in secret that rivaled or exceeded the military capabilities of even the most advanced species in known space. And now, finally, they were coming to war. The Kepler system hung in the darkness of space, a small cluster of stars and planets that had recently become the center of a cosmic conflict. The Dragon Legion fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel with their weapon systems already active, the sensor networks deployed, the tactical computers calculating trajectories and firing solutions within human precision. Captain Marcus Chun felt the Valiant around him like a second skin, understanding her capabilities and limitations with the intuition of a master musician understanding an instrument. The Krell warships filled the space around Kepler Colony Prime like a swarm of locusts, their weapons already charged and ready for the bombardment of the human settlements below. When the Dragon Legion appeared, The Krell commanders were shocked. The number of human warships was far greater than their intelligence reports had suggested, and the design of these vessels was clearly advanced, featuring weapon systems that looked nothing like the crude military technology they had expected from a species they considered barely civilized. Admiral Victoria Stone coordinated the battle from the flagship Liberty, watching the tactical displays update in real time as the fleets moved into engagement range. The Krell formation was strong but conventional, following military doctrine that had worked for them for thousands of years against slower and less technological opponents. The humans, however, had trained for exactly this scenario of facing a numerically comparable or slightly superior force. The first volley of human weapons tore through the Krell fleet with devastating force. The advanced plasma cannons mounted on the Dragon Legion warships fired with perfect precision, each bolt striking the Krell ships with the force of nuclear weapons. The Krell shields, which had been designed to protect against conventional energy weapons, flickered under the sustained assault. Some Krell ships exploded immediately, their reactors catastrophically failing under the strain. Others managed to execute evasive maneuvers, but they were slow and ponderous compared to the human vessels. Marcus Chun piloted the Valiant through a precise three-dimensional pattern, bringing his weapons to bear on the nearest Krell destroyer. His targeting computer locked onto the enemy vessel and fired quantum torpedoes, advanced projectile weapons that utilize quantum entanglement to achieve pinpoint accuracy. The torpedoes struck the Krell ship with tremendous force, breaching its hull in multiple locations. Marcus rolled his ship hard to port as return fire erupted from 3 Krell destroyers in the area around him. Missing by narrow margins, the battle became a chaotic dance of death and fire, with ships maneuvering at incredible speeds, their computers making adjustments that biological pilots could never have managed. The Krell had numerical superiority, but the humans had technological superiority and the strategic advantage of having chosen the time and place of engagement. The human commanders had studied Krell military doctrine, analyzed their weaknesses, and designed tactics specifically to exploit those weaknesses on the ground. Commander David Harper watched the space battle unfold on the tactical displays in the command center. The sight of human warships engaging and defeating Krell vessels filled him with a fierce pride. He had known that Earth had hidden military resources, but seeing the Dragon Legion in action exceeded even his expectations. These were not desperate defenders fighting with insufficient equipment. These were warriors with superior weapons, superior training, and superior will. The Krell ground forces, which had occupied the colony for only hours, began to realize that their situation was becoming desperate. They had conquered the colony under the assumption that human reinforcements would be weeks away, or would arrive in small numbers that could be defeated through superior military experience. Now they faced the prospect of being trapped between the human defenders in the underground sections and an overwhelming air force above them. General Sarah Johnson's assault teams launched their attack from the underground tunnel systems, emerging into the light of day where the Krell had grown complacent. These soldiers were equipped with weapons far beyond anything the Krell had anticipated, carrying portable energy weapons that could penetrate Krell body armor with relative ease. The assault teams moved with perfect coordination, using tactics that had been developed specifically for fighting an enemy of Krell size and strength. They were smaller, faster, and more agile than their Krell opponents. The battles in the streets of Colony Prime became a brutal demonstration of human tactical superiority. The Krell warriors were larger and stronger than human soldiers, but they fought with a rigid discipline that made them vulnerable to flexible human tactics. The humans used cover effectively, coordinated their attacks with precision, and withdrew when necessary only to attack again from a different direction. The Krell found themselves being herded and defeated, their superior numbers meaning little when they faced opponents who had trained specifically to overcome Krell advantages in orbit. The Dragon Legion fleet continued its relentless assault on the Krell warships. Several Krell vessels attempted to retreat, but the humans had positioned their ships to prevent escape. Captain Marcus Chen pursued a fleeing Krell destroyer, his weapons hot and ready. The Valiant was faster and more maneuverable, and he was able to get into the enemy ship's rear arc where its weapons could not effectively reply. The quantum torpedoes struck true, and the Krell destroyer exploded in a brilliant flash of light that illuminated the region of space for millions of kilometers. The Krell commander made the decision to surrender when it became clear that victory was impossible. The Krell fleet was being systematically destroyed, and the Krell ground forces were being defeated in detail throughout the colony. There was no honorable way to achieve victory in this situation, and continuing the fight would only result in pointless death. Krell ships raised their shields in the signal of surrender, and the human forces ceased their bombardment. Admiral Victoria Stone ordered the capture of the Krell flagship and the arrest of the enemy commander. She wanted to understand who had sent this fleet and why the interrogation would yield valuable intelligence about the Krell Dominion and their intentions toward humanity. Commander David Harper received orders to establish order throughout the colony and to begin rendering medical care to both human colonists and Krell prisoners of war. Colonists emerged from the underground shelters to find their world transformed. They had survived the attack. Yes, but the colony had been scarred by battle. The buildings were damaged, the infrastructure was compromised, and thousands of their friends and neighbors were dead. But they had also learned something crucial. They had learned that Earth had not abandoned them, that help had come, and that humanity could stand against any enemy in the galaxy. Elena Martinez organized the medical teams to care for the wounded, both human and Krell. The sight of human doctors tending to Krell soldiers with the same professionalism and care they gave to human patients was profound and spoke to something fundamental about human nature. They could wage war with devastating effectiveness, but they chose to show mercy to the defeated. The Krell commander, Cable, was processed as a prisoner, but was treated with respect and dignity rather than as a conquered enemy to be tormented. In the command center, David Harper and Victoria Stone stood side by side, observing the aftermath of the battle. The ground was littered with the remains of war, but the colony would survive and rebuild. The human forces had suffered significant casualties, but the victory was complete and undeniable. The Krell forces had been utterly defeated, and a message had been sent to every civilization in the galaxy. A new power had emerged, and it would not be ignored or pushed aside by older species. The Dragon Legion had come to the Kepler system, and they had brought the fury of an entire species that had been prepared for this moment for generations. The age of human subordination in galactic affairs was over. The Galactic Council Chamber was a vast circular space designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of intelligent species. The high ceilings stretched upward, and the walls were embedded with technology that could translate any language into any other language instantaneously. Ambassador Henry Cole walked through the main entrance with the bearing of someone who represented a civilization no longer willing to be marginalized. He carried data chips containing evidence of human military capability, economic strength, and technological advancement. The Chancellor of the Council was an ancient being named Zerduk, a creature who had lived for more than 10,000 years in some form or another. His species was among the oldest in the known galaxy, and they had guided the Galactic Council through countless crises. His expression did not change as he observed the human ambassador taking his seat, but there was something different in his posture, a recognition perhaps that the galactic political landscape had fundamentally shifted. Hearing began with testimony from multiple species about their experiences during the Kepler conflict. Representatives from the Vorthan Confederation reported that the Krell Dominion had been operating in their territory for years, making aggressive moves and making demands that seemed designed to establish dominance. The Caldarian scientists spoke about how human military Technology was clearly comparable to or superior to the military technology of species that had been spacefaring for millennia. Krell Commander Cavil was brought to the chamber under guard to provide his own testimony. He was a tall creature with 4 arms and eyes that glowed with an internal light. He spoke with the mechanical precision of a military officer, confirming everything that the other species had reported about the attack on Kepler Colony Prime. He explained that his superiors had ordered the assault based on intelligence reports, suggesting that the human colonies were lightly defended and would offer little resistance. The Krell Dominion had catastrophically underestimated human military capability and human determination. Commander Cavil admitted that the human warriors fought with a ferocity and effectiveness that had taken the Krell commanders by surprise. Their weapons technology had exceeded all expectations. Their tactical doctrines had been superior to the tactics that the Krell had developed over thousands of years of warfare. Ambassador Henry Cole stood and addressed the council. His voice was steady and measured. A master of diplomacy who knew exactly what he was doing. Humanity comes before you today, not as a conquered species seeking mercy, nor as a desperate civilization pleading for aid. We come before you as a people who have been sleeping while we prepared ourselves for our place among the stars. He outlined human history, showing how humans had evolved on a harsh world called Earth, a world where survival required constant adaptation, innovation, and cooperation. How humans had learned to work together despite their differences. How they had built civilizations through creativity and determination. How they had turned their struggles into strength and their hardships into wisdom. The evidence was compelling. Archaeological records showed that humanity had always valued justice and compassion, even during times of great conflict. Humans had written codes of conduct that valued mercy and fairness thousands of years before they encountered other intelligent species. The records showed humans building civilizations that encouraged individual achievement while protecting the vulnerable and weak. Ambassador Cole presented data about human economic output and manufacturing capacity. He showed how human worlds, despite being relatively young in galactic terms, had achieved production levels comparable to much older civilizations. The presentation demonstrated that humanity was not just a military power, but also an economic and technological force that could not be dismissed or sidelined by the older species. Several species that had previously doubted human capabilities formally apologized and expressed their desire to establish trade relationships and diplomatic alliances. The Vorthan Confederation presented a proposal for a joint scientific research initiative with humanity. The Kelderan species offered to share advanced medical technologies in exchange for human military technology development. But Ambassador Cole was careful to frame humanity's military strength not as a threat but as a commitment to peace. Humanity does not seek conquest, he said, his voice resonating through the chamber. We have shown that we can defend ourselves and our allies. We have shown that we will not tolerate aggression against the innocent. But we have also shown that we show mercy to the defeated and treat prisoners with respect. Humanity's strength will be used to protect others and to maintain peace, not to dominate. The Council voted on a series of resolutions, recognizing humanity's full membership in the galactic community with all attendant rights and responsibilities. The Krell Dominion was formally censured and placed under strict conditions by the Council. A permanent human representative was established on the Council itself, giving humanity a voice in decisions that affected the entire galaxy. President Robert Hayes addressed the human worlds through a broadcast that was carried on every human-controlled world in existence. Today, he said, humanity stands at a threshold. We are no longer a young species learning the rules of a galaxy governed by others. We have taken our place as equals among the great civilizations of space. He acknowledged the sacrifice of those who had died defending the Kepler colonies. He spoke of the wounded who were recovering in hospitals across human territory, He praised the courage of the Dragon Legion forces who had fought and bled to secure humanity's future. He pledged that humanity would use its newfound prominence to advance the causes of peace, justice, and mutual cooperation. The effect of humanity's emergence as a galactic power rippled through the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Ancient civilizations that had believed themselves to be the pinnacle of development suddenly had to confront the fact that a younger species had matched or exceeded their capabilities in multiple important ways. Some species viewed this development with concern. Others saw opportunity and began making overtures toward closer relations with humanity. Trade began almost immediately. Companies from dozens of species sought to establish relationships with human merchants and manufacturers. The human economy began to transform as alien resources flooded into human territory, and human goods and services became valuable commodities throughout the galaxy. Scientific collaboration increased as researchers from multiple species recognized the value of human perspectives and approaches to solving problems. But not all species welcomed this development. The conservative faction of the Galactic Council, led by species that had maintained their dominance through tradition and the presumption that their ways were the best ways, began to quietly resist human advancement. They leaked false information to the media. They spread rumors about human barbarism and human unreliability. But these efforts were largely ineffective because the truth had been revealed and could not be hidden again on the Kepler colonies. The process of rebuilding began in earnest. The Dragon Legion forces remained in orbit and on the ground to provide security and assistance. The human soldiers who had liberated the colonies were hailed as heroes and welcomed into the communities they had saved. General Sarah Johnson was offered the position of military governor of the Kepler system, a post she accepted with the understanding that she would serve only as long as necessary to restore full civilian governance. Commander David Harper was promoted to the rank of general in the formal Colonial Defense Force, making him one of the highest-ranking military officers in the colonies. He worked with local administrators to restore infrastructure and rebuild the homes and public buildings that had been damaged in the colonies. He worked with local administrators to restore infrastructure and rebuild the homes and public buildings that had been damaged in the colonies. Assault Elena Martinez was appointed to head the Reconstruction Commission, overseeing the rebuilding of the colonies and the integration of new technologies and resources from allied species. She worked tirelessly to ensure that the colonists who had lost everything were cared for and that the colony was rebuilt better and stronger than it had been before. Weeks after the initial conflict, the truth about the Dragon Legion program began to be revealed to the wider human public. There had been speculation and rumors for years about hidden military capabilities, but seeing it confirmed was a shocking and humbling experience for many humans. The revelation sparked intense debates about the costs and benefits of maintaining such a massive, secret military force, but ultimately, the human people understood why it had been necessary. A younger species could not challenge older, established powers in the open without inviting immediate retaliation. An emerging civilization had to develop its strength in secret, waiting for the moment when it could no longer be ignored or suppressed. The Dragon Legion had been that moment, and it had changed everything. 1 year after the conflict ended, the Kepler colonies had been transformed. The damage from the battle had been repaired, and the colonies had been rebuilt using advanced technology acquired through human trade, partnerships with allied species. The architecture was different now, incorporating design elements from multiple civilizations, creating something that belonged to all species rather than humans alone. The memorial ceremony took place in Colony Prime, in a newly constructed amphitheater that could accommodate thousands of people. The monument itself was beautiful and terrible, a structure created from materials that came from multiple civilizations on the galactic community. Each species that had joined humanity in alliance had contributed something to the monument. The Vorthan had donated crystalline material that caught and reflected light in mesmerizing patterns. The Keldarian had crafted portions of the structure that held recorded messages and images of the fallen soldiers. General David Harper stood before the assembled crowd of colonists and soldiers, both human and alien. The ceremony was being broadcast across the entire human civilization, carried by communications networks to every human world. The general looked tired, as if the weight of the past year had been pressing down on his shoulders. But his voice was clear and strong when he began to speak. "We gather here to remember those who gave their lives protecting others," he said, his eyes sweeping across the assembled faces. "They died so that their families could survive. They died so that children could grow up safely under open skies. They died not to conquer, but to defend. The Dragon Legion carries their memory in every mission we undertake, in every promise we make to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Admiral Victoria Stone stood at his side. Her uniform was pristine and formal, but there was warmth in her expression as she watched the people gathered to remember. Those who have fallen have created a legacy that will extend across generations. They have shown that strength is not measured by the size of weapons or the power of weapons systems. They showed that true strength is the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than yourself, for the protection of others, for the future of your civilization. The ceremony included speeches from representatives of allied species who had come to pay their respects. The Vorthan ambassador spoke about the shared sacrifice and cooperation that had made the victory possible. The Keldarian scientist spoke about how human innovation had helped overcome the technical challenges of the conflict. The representative from 3 other species expressed their gratitude to humanity for taking a stand against aggression. Elena Martinez unveiled a section of the monument dedicated to the medical personnel who had died trying to save the lives of the wounded during the assault. The names of 53 doctors, nurses, and medics who had been killed in the line of duty were inscribed on the memorial. The ceremony acknowledged that heroism was not limited to military personnel, but extended to everyone who had risked their lives to help others. After the formal portion of the ceremony, the crowd was invited to walk through the memorial gardens. These gardens had been created using plants and trees from multiple worlds, creating a living symbol of the unity of the galactic community. Children from various species played together in the gardens, their laughter carrying through the air in a sound that seemed like hope itself. The garden symbolized the future that humanity was building, not through domination, but through cooperation and friendship. In the months following the ceremony, the Dragon Legion took on a new role in galactic affairs. Rather than serving solely as a human military force, the Dragon Legion became a peacekeeping organization for the entire galactic community. Species throughout the known galaxy began recruiting soldiers to serve in the Dragon Legion, creating a unified force that operated under principles established by multiple civilizations working together. Captain Marcus Chen was offered the position of commanding officer of the training academy, established to teach officers from multiple species the techniques and principles of Dragon Legion warfare. He accepted the position with the understanding that he would be teaching not just combat techniques, but also the philosophy of protecting the innocent and showing mercy to the defeated. Marcus began to develop curricula that reflected the best practices of human military tradition combined with the wisdom of older species. General Sarah Johnson remained in the Kepler system as the chief military administrator, but her role was slowly transitioning toward an advisory position. She had established a joint military council that included commanders from multiple species, each bringing their own expertise and perspective to the defense of the Kepler colonies. The system became a model for other regions of space that were seeking to establish similar joint defense structures. President Robert Hayes announced a historic initiative to establish the first joint exploration mission beyond the known boundaries of charted space. Human scientists, Vorthan explorers, and Kaldarian researchers would work together to push back the boundaries of known space and to make new discoveries that would benefit all participating civilizations. The mission would be launched within 2 years, giving all the species involved time to prepare. The education system on human worlds was transformed to reflect humanity's new place in the galactic community. Children began learning about other species and other cultures in schools alongside their traditional studies. They studied the history and philosophy of the Vorthan people and learned about the Kaldarian approach to scientific inquiry. They learned that humanity was part of a larger whole and that their responsibilities extended beyond their own worlds to the entire galactic community. Elena Martinez returned to her position as a medical administrator, but expanded her work to include training programs for doctors and medics from allied species. She established a Galactic Medical Research initiative that brought together researchers from multiple species to work on problems that affected all of them, regardless of their specific biology. Disease was not a human problem or an alien problem. Disease was a universal problem that required universal solutions. Trade between human territory and other regions of space grew exponentially in the marketplaces of the major human worlds. It became normal to see species of all types conducting business and exchanging goods. The economic boom that followed made human civilization wealthy but did not corrupt its values. Instead, the wealth was used to support education, research, and the development of new technologies that improved the lives of all species involved. But perhaps the most significant change was in the way that younger species in the galaxy began to regard their own potential for advancement. The rise of humanity demonstrated that an emerging civilization did not have to accept a subordinate role in galactic affairs. They could develop their capabilities in secret. They could prepare themselves for a moment when they would claim their rightful place as equals among the great powers of the galaxy. Dozens of younger species began establishing their own research programs and development initiatives. They looked to humanity as a model for how an emerging civilization could achieve rapid advancement. They studied human history and human culture, seeking to understand the combination of factors that had enabled humanity to rise so quickly to a position of prominence. Some species sent students and researchers to human universities to learn from human scholars and scientists. David Harper, now wearing the rank of general with the respect that came from his actions during the Kepler crisis, stood on the observation deck of the Liberty and gazed out at the stars. He thought about the colonists who had survived the attack, about the soldiers who had died to protect them, about the future that humanity had earned through sacrifice and determination. The message he had sent through the encrypted channel a year ago had changed everything. It had activated the machinery of human civilization, mobilized the Dragon Legion, and announced to the galaxy that humanity would no longer accept a secondary role in the community of civilizations. The Krell Dominion had believed they were attacking a primitive human species that would surrender quickly and without meaningful resistance. They had been catastrophically wrong. Commander Cavil, the Krell officer who had led the assault, remained a prisoner of war, but was being treated with respect and dignity. He had been offered the opportunity to study at human military academies and to understand the techniques and philosophies that had led to his defeat. Many of his fellow officers had accepted similar offers, and some were now training in Dragon Legion facilities. The age of humanity had truly begun on 1,000 worlds and in 1,000 ways, both large and small. Humans were establishing the foundations of a civilization that would endure for millennia. To come, the Dragon legacy would not be remembered as a story of conquest and domination, but as a story of a people who had prepared themselves for their destiny and had seized the moment when it arrived, not with cruelty, but with the strength that came from knowing they had the right to exist as equals among the stars.